Welcome to this introductory presentation of individualized supports for students who are deafblind. This initiative was developed through a collaboration between the New Jersey Department of Education and the College of New Jersey. There are 5 modules in this series. This is Module 4, which is Deafblindness 101, Understanding Deafblindness, Part 2. And we will begin. Topic 2, Understanding the Basics of Deafblindness. How do you get information? How do you experience the world? How do you learn? How do you gain knowledge? For most of us, this is what it looks like. About 45 to 50% of what we gain is through hearing, 50% through vision, a significantly less amount through touch, smell, and taste. So you can imagine, for most of us, we use our hearing and vision to gain information. We experience the world, learn and gain information from our coordinated use of the sensory system. Our sensory system, the component parts of it, are intended to work together. There is a synergy among these components. The distant senses, hearing and vision, they modulate the rest. The secondary senses of touch, taste, and smell factor in part of that synergy. The movement senses, proprioceptive, vestibular, and kinesthetic, are highly modulated by vision in particular, but can also be modulated by hearing. A loss of the coordinated use of our distant senses, hearing and vision, present challenges to all domains of human development and learning. Deafblindness refers to a degree of loss in both vision and hearing in the same individual. The federal definition of deafblindness under IDEIA reads this way: the concomitant hearing and vision impairments, the combination of which that create such severe communication and other developmental and educational needs that they cannot be accommodated in special education programs solely for children with deafness or children with blindness. In other words, deafblindness is a distinct disability group from individuals who are deaf and individuals who are blind. So what does this mean? Well, there is a medically verifiable hearing loss in this individual, as well as a medically verifiable vision loss in the same individual. Together, this combined sensory loss interferes with the individual's ability to acquire and access information, and as well as their ability to interact with the environment. Critical understandings. Number 1, there are varying degrees of hearing and vision loss, and the capabilities among each student who is deafblind. So in other words, this is a wide and varied, highly heterogeneous group of students and individuals. Critical understanding number 2, students with deafblindness may present additional disabilities. However, deafblindness must always be considered as their primary challenge because this impacts information gathering. This impacts the way we will teach, the way we will present, and the way we will ensure access to the instruction. Critical understanding number 3, in terms of the impact of deafblindness, it's not deaf plus blind equals deafblindness. It's not an additive effect. Much the same way it's not butter plus fly equaling a butterfly. That does not equal butterfly. This simply means that the impact of deaf-blindness has almost a multiplicity of effect, and it's also very unique to each individual who is deaf-blind. Something to think about. Students who have hearing and vision loss do not have access to the same quantity or quality of information as their sighted hearing peers, not without appropriate and sufficient accommodations. So it's all, we can do that. We can accommodate and provide sufficient input, but we must take steps to do so. So, with appropriate accommodations and interventions, children who have hearing and vision loss, deaf-blindness, will have improved access, but not necessarily equal access to the quantity or quality of information as their sighted peers. Equal access to instruction and the environment will require a support person to assure equal access. So it's not all about just what we do, but who is supporting that student. So in summary, typical effects of deaf-blindness. Deaf-blindness certainly impacts incidental learning, the ability and necessary means of bonding with others, self and body awareness and image, motivation to move about and to acquire learning, safety, it impacts safety. It can also impact and foster learned helplessness if we don't take steps to make sure that the student doesn't become experience learned helplessness. It can also be very isolating. Delays in learning caused by sensory impairment can be prevented. All of these effects can be prevented. So let's consider the origins of the difficulty. Remember to ask yourself, could this child be having problems because he or she can't see or hear clearly? Hearing and vision can change. Also, the hearing and vision can change. Be a good observer. Each time you see the child, are they having a better day in terms of their hearing and vision than they did the previous day? Or have they experienced a sensory change? Listen to the concerns of the family. When in doubt, seek evaluation. Understanding your students' hearing and vision impairments. There are some medical tests, reports for hearing, such as an audiogram, auditory brainstem response test, pure tone or air or bone conduction test, tympanogram, otoacoustic emissions tests. Some medical tests for vision reporting include a full ophthalmological exam, a visual evoke response test, an electroretinogram, or a low vision optometric exam. Let's recall for a moment that deaf-blindness is a set of characteristics in which there is a combination of visual and hearing impairment that cause significant communication needs and needs of support, developmental needs, incidental learning needs, and other learning needs. Major causes of deaf-blindness. There are several syndromes associated with deaf-blindness that could include Down syndrome, Usher syndrome, Chard syndrome. There can also be deaf-blindness caused by multiple congenital anomalies such as hydrocephaly, microcephaly, fetal alcohol syndrome, and maternal drug use. Prematurity can be a cause of deaf-blindness. There can also be causes related to congenital prenatal dysfunction, such as the AIDS virus, herpes, rubella, syphilis. There can also be postnatal causes of deafblindness, including asphyxia, head injury or traumatic brain injury, meningitis, cytomegalovirus, also known as CMV, or stroke. What do we know? Very rarely are individuals totally or profoundly deaf and totally blind in the same individual. Most individuals who are considered deafblind have some varying degree of hearing and vision loss. They may have more hearing than vision, or more vision than hearing. It varies. And once again, the federal definition states that children and youth having concomitant hearing and vision impairments, the combination of which creates such a severe communication and developmental and educational need that they cannot be accommodated in special education programs solely for children with deafness or for children with blindness. There is also a federal definition that refers to infants and toddlers birth through age 2 who are experiencing developmental delays, and it reads like this. Infants and toddlers from birth through age 2 who are experiencing developmental delays in hearing and vision have a diagnosed physical or mental condition that has a high probability of resulting in developmental delays in hearing and vision, or are at risk of having substantial developmental delays in hearing and vision if early intervention services are not provided. So essentially, the big difference between school-aged children who are deaf-blind by definition and infants and toddlers who are considered to be deaf-blind is the at-risk factor. We understand, and the reason for this is because we understand that in testing the hearing and vision of very young children, those tests can often turn up inaccurate until sufficient language is present for the child to be tested more accurately. So we allow for at-risk in the early intervention population. That is, the effects of another disability. There are the effects of another disability with hearing and vision. With hearing impairment may be more additive. That is, hearing impairment with an additional disability can result in a synergistic interaction that can result in more severe learning disabilities or difficulties than might originally have been expected. Deaf-blindness, how does it affect child development? Well, we've hit on that in some ways, but let's make sure we all have understanding. It can impact the development of relationships if children don't know that caregivers are present. It can impact orientation and mobility, the child's understanding of their body in space and their ability to move safely around their environment. It can impact the understanding of concepts about the world. Can they or do they have difficulty compensating for the missing pieces created by the hearing and vision loss? It can impact the learning of language or the acquisition of language. It can impact how we assess their cognitive abilities. Oftentimes, children who are deaf-blind may be mistaken for children with cognitive or intellectual disabilities. And my rule of thumb has always been suspend beliefs about cognition until we understand how the information is getting in, how they're accessing information, how they're processing it, and what they're able to do with it once they have access. It can also impact the ability to achieve sensory homeostasis. Oftentimes, children with deaf-blindness experience what we refer to as self-regulatory behaviors to create additional sensory input to help compensate for missing pieces, or to shut out sensory input that may be overloading them. The end, and hopefully a very good beginning. Please remember to fill out the 5-question post test at the end of this. Thank you very much.